Hello, and welcome to Based on Facts, where fiction and superstition meet logic and scientific facts, on WELT 95.7 FM, broadcasting from the Allen County Public Library. Tonight's episode is going to be on America, the home of the brave. I'm your host, Chris Rex. This is my wife, Uriah. And we are going to be discussing kind of how this aura of fear has been permeating through the American populace lately. It just seems that we've been getting tied up in how everything is focusing on our response to things that may or may not necessarily be dangerous to us. And just as human beings, when we think about fear and how we react to fear, we find ourselves becoming afraid or anxious when encountering certain things, certain topics, leading us to do things that may not necessarily be the best reaction to said things. So whether we are trying to avoid certain stimuli or whether we are actively being hostile towards certain stimuli in society, in our culture here in America, we're going to kind of analyze that tonight and analyze a lot of different things in culture here that we are seeing, a lot of things we're noticing. So one of the things I'd like to start with here is kind of one of the little bits of our history here in America. We can look at a little excerpt here from a U.S. history book that kind of talks about Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, and James Madison, who were among the first people to start taking these brave steps towards creating a government based on the Enlightenment values of liberty, equality, and a new form of justice.
That's a really, really roundabout way to say the stinking American Constitution. History book? Really?
Yeah.
You were such a scientist.
That's what I do. That's what I do. So what about the Constitution then?
Well, what about it?
Well, you're the expert on the Constitution compared to me. I really don't know a whole lot about it. So what does the U.S. Constitution say America was kind of founded on, so to speak?
Okay. Everyone says, this whole country was founded on, well, if you're in some areas, like the South, the Bible Belt, they would say that it was founded on religious freedom. That's not the truth at all, actually. The whole idea of America was created because a group of people in England wanted to be able to, be free in their religion. That's true. Protestants, that's where all that came from. But it was much more than that, because it wasn't just, they couldn't be free to practice their beliefs in their own way. It was much more, these Protestant people were very poor. There was no real noblemen among them. That's why they all were crammed on 3 ships, and they just went over there, and a lot of them died just to get over there. So this was not a venture taken lightly. This was a very risky, very expensive venture that they were leaving. They weren't coming back at all. So they went over there, and it became more than religious freedom. Yes, at that time, most of the world was religious because we didn't know what we knew now. So that's a very key factor. So they came over there, religious freedom was true, but looking at the events that came after that, we started seeing the American Revolution. Civil War came a lot after that, and that was a lot about religious freedom and civil rights, but we'll get there later. But American Revolution, that's when America was really starting to be shaped. Because before that, it was building and sadly getting rid of the Indians, and there was all of that stuff that we really won't want to touch on. I wouldn't touch that with a 60-foot pole, to be quite honest. So, American Revolution, Constitution was written, Declaration of Independence, everything was awesome, but that was just the beginning. But we achieved what we were founded on. I'll quote, for the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is exactly what the Constitution. We the people. Actually, give me a second here. Alright, the only way to do this properly is to do the patriotic way. Ask Google. So, if you sit here and you Google, watch this, American Constitution, what do you get? We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, so first point right there, perfect union. That includes everybody. Establish justice. That's a really, really big deal. Justice. It's because England, it was ruled by a monarchy at the time. And yes, Parliament kind of is the checks and balances of the monarchy, but there's a lot of stuff that falls in between the cracks, and the Protestants, being the lower end of the caste system, they got the crap that dripped down. So justice is a really big deal because it's the rebel cause. Everyone wants justice. Everyone wants that. So that's why it was such a big thing, particularly in this Constitution. So in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility. Domestic tranquility, that's a big word for everybody play nicely. So it wasn't just justice, it was all about being fair, there was all about a harmony, there was all about everyone working together. No king, court, nobility, poor people, everyone was on the same playing field. Again, another super novel idea considering everybody else had been using that type of government, which is why we were so different for our time. I mean, yeah, the Romans kind of figured out how to do that, and then that kind of got shoved aside. Now we had to bring it back. Funny how that works. So, promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. So, key points: establish order, perfect union, justice, and domestic tranquility. That's a big deal. It's what we were founded on. So that's really important when we sit here and we talk about why America is so afraid, is to remember those things. America stands for freedom on every level, no slavery, freedom to practice your religion, or freedom to not needing to practice a religion if you don't believe in any higher power or any spirituality. You know, you're free to believe that without persecution. That's fine. And then also, the Constitution talks about everybody, not just rich people, not just favoring the poor people and the underdog. It's everyone. You know, and it talks about justice, being fair across the board, no exceptions, no exemptions, no matter who you are, what you do, where you came from. Like, that's kind of an important one, where you came from, whether it's overseas or whether you're born in this country. Funny that. Everyone who is a citizen here gets the same treatment. And again, to finish up, tranquility, peace. That's what tranquility means. It means contentment, peace. It means unity. That's what that word tranquility embodies. And it's kind of nice they had the promote this Constitution for ourselves and our posterity, which means it's not just something that we're going to do now and then maybe change later. This Constitution was meant for them and for the generations to come. So that is America. That's kind of a big deal, how we got there. Considering what we went through to accomplish all of that, how many people died, how many fights. I won't give you the history lesson this time. I love the American Revolution. Very passionate patriot here. So yeah, that is the Constitution, essentially in a nutshell. I'm no means a historian. I don't have a degree or anything like that. I've read a lot about it. That's a very general, it's a big gist. That's not very specific, so please don't read into that and take that way too much context.
Okay, well, I guess what I got out of that was we're all a bunch of peace and love kind of kumbaya singing hippies, the founding fathers at least.
Yes, but while we're sitting here with our ukuleles, we have a, rifle with a, big old knife on the end of it. That's not a hippie I would like to mess with.
Fair enough, armed hippies. Okay.
Yes, armed hippies.
Very
we're all about peace and love and pass the jambalaya and play the drum and the ukulele, but, if you start disturbing the tranquil circle, man, what's wrong?
Interesting.
That sounds weird, but that's actually pretty good, because nobody really likes hippies because they think they're unrealistic. Nobody likes an armed person. They think they're too activist, kind, or eccentric. Not reasonable, don't think, but a hippie with a gun, he's not likely to use it unless he's going to die or somebody takes his brownies.
So are you basically hinting at what might happen to Indiana if we actually get marijuana legalized in this state? We'll just have a bunch of hillbilly hippies?
That might be the best thing that's ever happened to Indiana, if they legalize marijuana, because we wouldn't need to freak out about, oh my gosh, 22 is going to be jacked up in price. It's gonna steal it because they're trying to take our guns, load up on ammo, and now I can't find 22 long rifle in any store. I'd be sitting there and I'd be going, give me the brownie batter. I need my sugar. That's what I'd be running to the store for. There'd be no flour, there'd be no sugar. Buy up your cows to get milk for your brownies.
Oh my gosh. The brownie revolution has come. Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, as an aside, getting back on topic, I guess one of the things I was kind of thinking about when I tend to think about some of the things that have influenced at least my upbringing is one thing in particular, the national anthem. So, they will go and sing this song in a number of different contexts, right before a baseball game, for instance, or something.
Watch it at baseball anymore. Football, they do it at football games. Well,
all right.
They pick a giant celebrity to sing the national anthem at the Super Bowl every year.
They do it at sports events, and things, but...
they do it at the sport event.
Okay. We can talk about football history and sports types things later. Right
Steelers
now,
Nation.
We're trying to stick on topic here. So we have the national anthem. And one thing kind of strikes me in that, since we've been using this as our national anthem for about 85 years now. And in fact, it was originally written, most of it anyway, was originally devised by Francis Scott Key in 1814. It was in a slightly different form then, but it then was kind of turned into a song. But one thing
the English back then is very different from the English these days. Yeah. So if you heard it, you might not recognize it.
Right. What I found particularly interesting is how that song kind of ends on this note of America being the land of the free and the home of the brave. And that kind of struck a chord with me. I got to thinking, well, how much can that influence American society? Like, do people actually honestly still feel that America is home of the brave? Are we seeing this kind of pride and effort being put forth by Americans to still live up to that designation all those years ago that Francis Scott Key originally proclaimed that America was? What are your thoughts about that?
National anthem pertaining into the Constitution, my little rant that I went on, and how it adds to that. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, let's see. You got "Oh Say Can You See" by the dawn's early light. How's the rest of it go?
Oh, so proudly.
Yeah. Oh, so proudly we hail at the wow.
Twilight's
I
last
can't
gleaming.
even remember the whole song. Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, or the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. What's next? Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave? And then there's the part that you're talking about, for the land of the free and the home of the brave. So, American Revolution, a little bit after the American Revolution, actually, because this was written early 1800s. So, there was still a lot of war, still a lot of fighting going on. A lot of crazy stuff happening that embodies that song. But land of the free, home of the brave. This flag was created in wartime. Our country was created by war. This national anthem, created by war. Land of the free, home of the brave. So, yeah. Freedom, it's one of the big things we founded on, as I mentioned earlier. Bravery is kind of a big deal. Because bravery in this context, I think, is brave to do something that they may have thought was impossible. I want to sit here and say brave enough to do the right thing. I really can't say whether the founding of America started as the right thing. They came over from England to start a new settlement, and then America was triggered through taxes. Everyone loves that word. Taxes, taxes, taxes. Pretty much, England was under control, and they started enacting tax after tax after tax. Tax on sugar, tax on mail, tax on tea. That's a big one people will remember. But that's kind of what sparked this huge rebellion. The source of it was taxes, money, things that they thought weren't fair, that our mother country was taking all of this money and using it for their own needs and not helping us at all. Because we were very limited on our resources. England wasn't helping us. And we were like, come on, why are we need help, we need more of this. And their response was, no, we can't, because you're not big deal of enough to us. And to put you in your place, we're going to just keep up your costs, make this worse for you.
So isn't that kind of like the mafia? you pay a protection tax, but you're not getting much protection out of it. They're really just kind of bullying you into paying them money, even if they're not doing their job.
But that's a good word you say, bully.
Yeah.
Mafia people, they take their protection, and pretty much it's a way to threaten them and say, hey, I'm going to come in, you pay protection, nothing will happen to you. But then something happens to you, because that something is probably them. So they're pretty much saying, if you pay me, I won't rob you. That is what protection is. It's not protecting you from anything else. Protection is, hey, I'm going to convince you to hand over your money to me without anything in return. Because protection is protecting you of what I'm doing right now to you, robbing you. So it's interesting that you use that scenario, because England came over and yeah, they helped at first, but they started seeing how much we were growing. We were growing really, really fast, and organizations started. And they started seeing this rise, this potential rise of an actual nation. England is huge. And if you look at the initial 13 colonies that were America, and you add all of that together, it was small, but it was definitely larger than some of the small European countries. Think about that. We grew in a very short time to the size of a small country. We had no government. We completely relied on England. But we were strong enough to be on our own. We just didn't know it. That's essentially slavery / indentured servitude. And they came in, they saw that, and they pretty much said, taxes, we're going to tax you because we have to find some way to control you. So the best way to control somebody is what? Financially. And they tried that, and we realized that wasn't good enough anymore. And hence revolution, and we started our own deal because we thought we could do it better. You know, they looked at England and they saw King George. What does he really do for us that we can't do for ourselves? Because it wasn't just taxes. There were a couple other things also that sparked the revolution. It wasn't just about money, but it came down to, we can do this better. We can do this better without a monarchy, without parliament. We can do this whole thing. Not just taxes, not just shipments, and not all of that. Exporting goods and things like that. Tobacco was a big one. They said we can do this whole country thing better. And that was the war. And you talk about bravery. To think that way, to defy centuries of everything that you knew, everything that you were taught. From little kids, you're taught, oh, well, you have Queen Elizabeth, King George, whoever is the monarch at that time. From birth, you have the monarchy. And you know about Parliament, but your figurehead, the head of England, is whoever is the monarchy. And after centuries of that, because it wasn't just you, it was your mom, your grandpa, your great-grandpa, your neighbors, your friends, and then to go over and start thinking that way, it's something snaps in your head. Everyone's rebellious, but when you get the group of people that are the size of a country to rebel all together, all with the same idea, that is revolutionary, hence the American Revolution. And you have to be very brave to sit down and think, this is going to take a lot. These people were smart. I'm going to pause here. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin was one of our key inventors. He invented so many things. These men were brilliant. These were the height of intellectual accomplishment in the world at that time. These weren't just a bunch of people who lived in the woods or on the beach. Let's, rise rebellion because my taxes are... No, they were brilliant.
They weren't a bunch of armed militia ranchers from out west?
No. These were the height. These were the best of men that could be found anywhere. Okay, I wouldn't say anywhere. There were German scientists. There were other French minds who were also great, but they were great minds. One of the greatest minds. I mean, come on, Benjamin Franklin. He invented weed. What do you think? So, anyway, yeah. It took a lot of effort and a lot of time and a lot of knowledge and forethought to start this whole war. And you had cops, redcoats, all around you all the time. And these men, they had to meet in secret. Their families, their friends, everything that they held dear was on the line to do this. And they didn't back out. They didn't say there, well, my family got threatened one night. I'm out, guys. I can't do this. I have kids. I have a wife. I have a plantation down south. Thomas Jefferson, he had plantation. He had slaves that he thankfully later freed because of the idea. But these men were wealthy. They were empowered. They were smart. And they put all of that on the line to make this happen. And they saw through the whole thing. No matter how many people died, it was the cause. And it wasn't just these great minds thinking together and being so brave together. They inspired everybody else. And they had to stay brave or else the whole thing would crumble. I mean, Benjamin Franklin, his son was still with the Redcoats. And he lost, that's the first thing, he lost his family over this. And yet he still persevered. And so it takes a lot of bravery and commitment, determination to pull something like this off. And it's amazing for one person to show that type of chutzpah, we'll say, to show that kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm just saying, to show that kind of greatness.
Yeah.
It's amazing to find that in one person, but then to find that in a complete nation. Trump's thing is make America great again. I see where he's coming from, but that greatness is in every single person, because America was great minds like Benjamin Franklin all the way down to somebody who just picked cotton in a field. To, what was it? Paul Revere. He was a dentist. He was just a dentist. And yet, he is one of the most iconic people in our whole revolution. So, whole thing about this bravery is, yes, you have to be very brave. But it's more than that. It's commitment. It's determination. And it's selfless. It's another thing. Selflessness. To be able to give up something for you, very important to you, for the greater good. You know, our very Constitution says to promote the general welfare and, tranquility. You have to give something up that you really want for the benefit of everyone. And that benefit also includes you in the long run. So it's not a truly selfless act, because if it was, that's initially suicide. Because when you give up something for the general good, if everyone's happy, you're generally happy too. Generally. So, America, make America great again. Apparently we are not like our founding fathers. Because why? Are we afraid? We've changed. Our mindset has completely changed from our founding fathers. And you can sit here and you can say, well, it's because they come from a simpler time. They didn't have as much to worry about as we do. No, they had more. They had disease. They had food shortages, water shortages. They had winter. Winter back then, not fun. They had so much more to worry about. They had so much more at stake. If they didn't get up and do what they needed to do, they might not live next year. So, I think our fear, the reason that America seems to be declining, okay, maybe not declining, but our mindset has changed, is because we don't have as much at stake. We have gotten very lazy. And in our laziness, what do we turn to? What's important? Surviving next year, surviving through the winter, doing your job well and making sure everyone's okay, making sure your neighbor's okay, because if something happens to you, you kind of depend on your neighbor and vice versa. You don't have that survival instinct that makes you so brave. When you're a little bit lazy, what becomes important to you? The people around you. The things around you. So I think that is one of the biggest things that have shifted our mindset from the great, the brave America to what we are now. We are worried about who uses the bathroom and what. We're worried about the silliest things. Gay marriage. Really? We are going to overthrow this whole country and put it all in an uproar because 2 guys want to get married, 2 girls want to get married. That's what we're going to worry about when we have things like climate change, when our resources on this earth will eventually run out, probably sooner rather than later, and we are thinking about cutting funding for outer space. when we can see the world. You know, sometimes you have a problem and sometimes you wish you could just be able to pick it up and look at it from all corners so you can understand it and know what you need to do. We can do that from space. We can look at the Earth and we can see volcanoes, predict earthquakes, we can see this hurricane coming across, and yet they want to cut that funding that allows us to do that and more. Why? Why have we come so far away from our founding fathers? Benjamin Franklin he harnessed lightning. He looked up to the heavens and he didn't say, oh, well, God wouldn't want me to, grab, lightning, I can't be, Thor, whatever you want to believe or whatever you want to go for. He said, in the interest of science, harness the power of lightning. That was amazing back then. And now people are yelling at us because we want to harness the power of the sun and solar panels? It's a lot less dangerous to do. Holding up a big rod. Bzz. Come on.
Yeah, no, that's that's always astounded me, just looking at those kinds of perspectives, because that really does put things in the spotlight of being pretty astounding, all the things that we've accomplished historically here in America and how our views and motivations have changed so much. And you were mentioning how one of the things about America was that we were trying to do it better than the other countries. And to do that kind of takes a little bit of this bravery thing, kind of takes looking fear in the face and spitting in it and saying, ha, I can do this, go away. So facing down that fear, I think, is really part of something that helps bring community, like what you were saying. We need to bring that community back to the American minds and get this sense of belonging and pride. Being okay with making a little bit of sacrifices that might make much bigger investments in not only your future, but everyone else's futures as well. And that was one of the things I was kind of interested in, was just looking at how our foreign policy as a country is so often criticized. We're sometimes thought of as being this big a world police force that insists on sticking its nose in everybody's business. But we tried playing it the other way. Okay, we did that during World War I until, funny enough, we decided to start getting more involved with it.
But here's the thing. Why did America get involved in World War I? We were playing a neutral party because it really wasn't our fight. This was the first big world war where everyone was kind of tearing at each other's throats. So they were doing their thing, and it really wasn't our business. We were absolutely no threat, and they were no threat to us in any stinking way. What promoted us to get involved with them? What was that last straw where we said, screw it, we got to do something? What was it?
I cannot remember for the life of me.
Pearl Harbor.
That was World War II.
Yeah.
Yes, II.
My bad.
Okay, so that's fine. That's fine. We can talk
Screw
about
World War I. World War II is what
Let's
I'm
talk about World War
about.
II. That's the fun one.
I thought you said II. My bad.
I'm sorry. Let's talk about World War II. I was just mentioning World War I because really we took a hands-off approach at the end of that, which is what helped spur World War II. Because we were like, hey, you know what? Screw you, Germany. You tried to start this crap. We're just going to leave your entire country in ruin. We're not going to help you rebuild everything. So guess what that did? That sowed seeds of dissent in the German people's eyes.
Yep.
That helped them rise up into, basically from the ashes like a phoenix. They just came back with a vengeance and tried to take over the world all over again.
No,
and that's how we ended up with World War II.
The reason we got involved with World War I think, was because of some trade agreement that we got something out of it, like something really big. It was something between us and, I think it was like England, France, and somebody else came and met with America, and they said, look, if we do this, then America gets a lot of good stuff because we need more men and they needed our technology, something like that. It was more of like a trade is how we got involved. The body count got so high. There was pressure from the American people saying we need to help them, we need to help them. But our involvement, it was a very slow transition. It was never one defining pinnacle because we tried and then it just got so out of hand. They needed more help overall. And we just kind of said, all right, let's do this. So, but yeah, World War II was much more definitive, was, look, we need to just let you guys figure this out, and that didn't work out, because then Pearl Harbor came, and it's like, that's what makes it a world war. And the world needs to be thought of more collectively. I'm going to sound like a hippie here. World needs to be more thought of as a family. And when family starts fighting, they don't just duke it out with themselves. They bring their friends, and then you start seeing this feud. And why would you not help when you know that you can step in and just grab them by the scruffs, pull them apart, and be like, look, stop it. The best way to, diffuse arguments before they escalate to physical violence is to talk down with a third-party member. That's what works. And that's why the UN was created after all of this crap that happened, was a way to try and talk between our nations before it got too out of hand. Funny how the UN is really helping.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of the direction I was going with that. Just because it really is interesting to look at that and see how we are we're almost an organism, really, at this point, as far as all the different peoples on Earth, and how we all interact. I mean, there's a world economy that is so sensitive to every single thing that goes on, that really, if there's some sort of disease, so to speak, breaking out in one part of the world, there's nothing really keeping that disease from spreading to every other, spreading to or like poisoning the entire rest of the world too. And we're really being brought home, this point is really being brought home to us when we think about disease outbreaks, right? So
Zika.
If we think about the Zika virus, if we think about things like Ebola, which is also a virus, I mean, that was terrifying a couple of years ago. I just showed a video to my class, just kind of looking at Ebola and how terrified Americans were when they heard that people, American missionaries, they actually got Ebola in Africa, and they were brought back to the U.S. so they could be properly treated in our hospitals for this nasty virus. People lost their minds, because that's when they actually knew for a fact that Ebola was brought into this country. And that thing is just so hard to contain as a virus, as a viral outbreak, that it's literally terrifying to think about, that even in completely sterile situations, people somehow, the doctors and the caregivers, they can somehow still get sick. That is just mind-blowing and terrifying. It brings you to thinking about some movies on the topic. One of my favorites is Outbreak, which, funny enough, was a very Ebola-like virus that had become airborne, which...
Once something becomes airborne, you're almost toast.
If Ebola ever evolves the ability to go airborne, this world will be in for a big, big hurt.
Yeah. We're going to look like China. We're all going to have masks on, and we're going to talk like this.
Yeah, it's going to be awful when that virus evolves the ability to aerosolize itself.
And unless we contain it, do what we can to keep everything down in every country. Africa doesn't have the technology and the ability to maintain Ebola as well as America does. So when people sit here and say, well, they need to help themselves, and why should we stick our noses? We need to stick our noses in another country to maintain a virus that could very easily get to us if it becomes airborne. So that's one reason why you need to have community, because what can happen over there can happen over here.
And what was cute was we actually watched this movie on Hulu. It's called Containment.
Yeah.
And
messed up.
It was kind of showing the scenario. Where were they? Were they in some European country, I think?
Yeah, I think it was England, but I could be wrong. They had English accents, but...
Yeah, it was in some European country, and they had a disease outbreak in an apartment complex. And so what they did was they essentially quarantined the entire complex and tried to seal up all the doors and the windows, trying to keep people inside while they figure out how to go about treating these people, and methodically going through and identifying who has the disease, who is past the point of no return, and who can actually be vaccinated and safely removed from the area.
And when he says this movie where they try to keep everyone indoors, they really, really meant it. There were like 3 large buildings was the apartment complex, and they had everything quarantined to this area. Nowhere outside was infected. They really had it quarantined to these buildings. And overnight, somehow, they sealed up all the doors and locked all the windows. These people couldn't get out of their apartment. Their little apartment buildings, houses, they could not, it wasn't just couldn't get out of the building, they couldn't get out of their individual apartments. And they were freaking out. Because here's your option. In a situation like that, you can either one, say, just stay calm, we'll be with you in a moment, we'll be with you in a med team trying to, we'll get there. That's going to make people go crazy. You're thinking, oh, medicine, I'm locked in here, I can't go in, I can't go out. My freedom has been, I don't want to say taken away because it's not officially infringed upon. There you go. Your privacy has been infringed upon, even though it hasn't gotten in by breaching that door. That's breaching your privacy, your freedom. You are officially in prison for a short time and you don't know anything. That's going to cause somebody to freak out. Or on the other hand, you could say, look, you're quarantined, we're putting you here and keeping you in your individual apartments for your own safety because there's a virus and we're trying to figure out. That's going to make people even more freak out, because if you tell people there's a sickness going around and if you tell them the symptoms, you'll start having phantom symptoms. That's very normal. If you say, well, this virus, it's going to start with a cough and then a sore throat and then you're going to get dizziness, this person will suddenly have all of those symptoms even though they don't have the virus. It's because they were told that and they're freaking out so much. So either way, you're screwed. So that movie Containment was watching the effects of a containment situation, and it was messed up. Everyone just started going at each other, and then somebody got free, and then they started turning on the doctors in hazmat suits. It was kind of messed up. Cool view, but messed up.
But I guess my point in bringing that up was just how that's how we handle it here in first world countries. Okay, that was a fairly rich country that this film took place in, so they were able to come out in full hazmat suits, completely quarantine a place, and they had very, very good control of the situation. And even then, you had people being able to break out of that situation. Mm-hmm. That was highly contained in a modern environment with top-notch technology. Go to Africa, where this Ebola virus is outbreaking, and you see a much different perspective. Yeah. You see a situation where a part of the city is quarantined or shut off from the entire rest of the city, and this quarantine zone is separated by a piece of twine. Okay, so that's great. It's open air. People can kind of cross it, pretty easily.
I might mention in this movie Quarantine, to keep people, if they did escape from the complex building and tried to run away, into the city or something, there were snipers on the rooftops keeping people who would escape. They had to shoot them to keep them from going. In Africa, in a real life situation, yeah, that's not going to happen. If it's a piece of twine, you just essentially live there and you don't have proper medical equipment. You don't have proper doctors. You're screwed. You just basically live out the rest of your life with everybody else around you because they probably had it because you don't have indoor plumbing. You don't have a way to wash your hands all the time. You don't have a way to anything that you eat. And that's just worries if it's not airborne, which is what Ebola is right now. Imagine if that is allowed to continue. If we don't contain Ebola and other diseases around the country instead of just within our own country, imagine if it keeps going, it's going to keep growing, it's going to keep mutating, and suddenly, boom, it will become airborne. So our role, if we have the ability and the technology to protect ourselves, we have to protect other people. Just like way back when in our founding fathers, to protect yourself, you had to protect your neighbors. And it's not just for, this day, it's not just viruses that you're trying to protect from. Cuba had a vaccine for lung cancer. And that's kind of a pretty big deal because we didn't have access to it. But thanks to Obama, some things have gotten a little bit easier, and that vaccine is going to come to us. I don't know if it's going to start going into human trials, if it's a true vaccine, but it is something that greatly decreases lung cancer. And we don't have that because we decide to push them away. Oh, bad Cuba, blah, blah, blah. That is not how we get forward in the human race.
Yeah, breaking down those barriers, breaking down that Berlin Wall in Germany. That was a landmark event, and it was basically trying to get past all these old ways of doing things to where we just shut people down, where we have these borders that can't be crossed. Now, honestly, we still have some borders in certain circumstances, like the border between North and South Korea, because North Korea is a bunch of crazy people. Their regime is still very old school. Iran is kind of similar. So we've been weeding these people out. We got rid of Iraq, which is another horrible situation, and it was good. We finally stepped up to the plate and weeded out that nasty element that was just poisoning the Middle East. Saddam's reign was just nothing but toxic to that region of the world, and it was an excellent thing for us to get that purified, get that out of the area, and try to bring them to some level of civilization, so to speak.
It's kind of worked.
Mm-hmm.
Problem in the Middle East is there's a lot of terrible things going on in the Middle East.
Yep.
You know, we thought we were done with Afghanistan. We're not. We thought we could be done with Iraq. We're not. But that, as much as I hate to say it, is really a religious war. The Middle East it's not just about control. ISIS isn't. It's about control, about power, but it's not we want to take over the country. It's all backed by a religious fanatic. That's everything that's happened in the Middle East. Everything has a very strong religion-driven idea behind it, because it's a very traditional religious country. It's a very religious culture in the Middle East. And, we can't sit there and say, well, your religion is terrible, we're not going to pay attention to your culture because it's wrong. But you can't tell somebody that your culture is wrong. If your religion is preaching, terrible things, murder and rape and all of that, that's obviously not good. But I was going to sit here and say I really doubt. No, it's not true. Being Islam does not mean that you enforce and are for rape and murder and violence. The Islamic religion is actually very peaceful, because if you look at the Bible, I remember that Jesus is going to come back with a sword of fire on a white horse, and he's going to wipe everybody out who doesn't believe him. There's a lot of violence and fear-driven propaganda in that. So, same thing, different country, because Islam, there probably are violent elements to it, and there's a lot of peace element to it. Christianity, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, everything is, they have their peace, they have their love, and then they have their violence and revenge. And God as a faithful God, and then there's God as a jealous, vengeful God. It's religion. And the Middle East is more actively religious than America is in some ways. I have to admit, it's kind of crazy if you think about it.
So I just kind of see the whole issue with that is just being the point that we are predominantly Christian here in America, and because a lot of the world is also Christian, and in fact Christian religion kind of has piggybacked with the advances in technology and with more modern civilizations. It's pretty much become the hip trend among the developing world.
Now, if you think about it, America, yes, they did want to have, religious freedom. That's what initially started the Pilgrims to come over. But the nation of America, if you look at the Constitution, which I just read earlier, it really doesn't highlight, religious freedom. It just talks about freedom across the board. So this nation isn't a nation that was founded solely so we could be Christians in our own way. It was much more than that. And I'm just trying to focus. The Founding Fathers' mindset was about survival, was about unity and everyone getting along. And yeah, it does kind of sound hippie, but that was their mindset, working together to achieve something great. They had to. And now I'm looking at today, what are we trying to achieve as a country together? We have no common goal as a country. And I think that's how we are so divided. Because the right wing wants this, left wing wants that. Democrats, Republicans, liberal, they all want something different. And we do not have the ability to be unified once again. And I think that might be why America has suddenly become so weak.
Right, because we're kind of focusing more on fighting with each other and diversifying and being very individualistic.
Yeah.
If we go around and start citing some statistics here, looking at some of the ways that people are afraid of various things here in America, we see some very interesting trends developing. You could talk about the rates of lawsuits. This has been kind of a thing. Really, in just the past 15 years, it's really exploded as far as the
Everyone wants
lawsuits.
to sue everyone.
Right. And
what happens when you sue someone? Money.
Right.
And principle. It's not
Right.
about the money, it's about the principle. Okay.
So if we look at one of the big people, class of people that are being sued on a regular basis, the physicians, 34% of them, so about a third of them, actually believe it is the largest problem with their field, with their medical profession. A third of it is just worrying about being sued. So what you'll actually see when you start looking at how medical doctors have changed their behavior in recent years, you'll see that they've actually performed all these unnecessary tests, gone out of their way to perform all these different tests just to make sure that you don't have something, because they might get sued if they don't do this particular test. And actually,
if they're not super thorough and do everything in their power before they do that surgery that is very risky, that they told the patient was risky, and if something happens, the patient could sit there and say, well, you could have tested this or could have tested that. The second opinion said you could have done this, and maybe the surgery would be... That's why they're doing all of that, is because they do not want to have a malpractice issue.
Yeah.
Which is sad, because it's wasting so much time, energy, resources, money.
Right.
Because they have to have their butts covered.
Yeah, and I think the last figure I saw was about $2 billion. And it's just because this 78% of doctors that have to go out of their way to make sure to cover every single track and have that all on record so that they don't get sued for it. Absolutely crazy. All these billions of dollars that we're wasting just on not getting sued, basically.
And not even just that,
crazy.
but this doctor and everyone is wasting all this time doing your test when somebody who probably needs a test a lot quicker than you do, because it could mean life or death, you have to do your test first. They have to wait. Because you take a test, and why does it take so long to get your test results? Well, the actual testing process takes time, but then you actually have to get the time to have somebody go through, test it, and then wait for it. It takes time and manpower. So while everyone's getting their useless, I use liberally, test, somebody needs that one vital test done.
Right. And that's why it's funny when you think about these people that go in to the doctor for an infection in their toe, and they need drugs for the pain and some antibiotics. And they're griping because it takes them a while to get those materials back to them, when there's somebody in the next room that's having open heart surgery and kind of needs every person on hand and available to help them with that. So people tend to think so much about themselves nowadays that doctors are put in a position where they're so afraid to not cater to everyone simultaneously. But they can't be everywhere at once. They have to prioritize. And you know what? Your poor infected body part can survive another couple minutes as I go to put this man's heart back together. Okay.
And this infected body part is just a little bit of pus and things that if you probably ran your toe in hot water and used some Neosporin on it, you'd probably be fine. You don't have blood poisoning or anything that might need some immediate attention before it gets all gangrenified and you look like a zombie.
Right. So yeah, that's one example. We can also talk about just the American populace in general, for me personally, I seem to perceive that this level should be higher, but we actually see a figure here of about 7% of people are afraid of being perceived as weak or worthless or poor or disrespected.
We put a lot of value on our own appearance, personal and professional. Our personal appearance, physically, and our professional, our lifestyle, our house, our cars, our jobs, how much we make.
Right. And speaking of jobs, there's definitely some figures here, especially with all this news coverage on police officers and maybe police brutality, so to speak. we see a figure of 15% of cops or of people are afraid of cops doing some sort of brutality to them at one point or another, which is crazy to think about. 15% of people are afraid of that. That's insane, because that's actually right below the amount of fear that people have for being mugged or murdered. That's insane to think about. I mean, when you hear about, oh yeah, getting mugged down an alley, okay. When you think of being killed in a stray drive-by bullet, okay. You normally don't say that in the same sentence as, oh, I'm afraid of this cop pulling me over and beating the crap out of me. Like, you don't normally think about that, but that's how people feel. People are getting so afraid of some of these things that...
Yeah, you see the red and blue lights, your heart starts thinking. And you're like, why am I so afraid? And you should be thinking, okay, what did I do wrong? You know, if you're just driving down and you see the lights when you're driving on the highway, you're like, oh God, I want to be careful. Because you know you're speeding. And that's wrong. Well, okay, maybe not exactly wrong. I'm a speed demon. But the point is that you're not supposed to be. And so it's you being afraid of getting caught. You're not afraid of the cop. You're afraid of getting caught. And thinking, I just do not need this right now. And that's sad, because there's so many police brutality videos out there. It makes people see, oh, cops, well, you know, they're just out to, you know, use their authority in the wrong ways and just, you know, be able, I've got a nightstick and a gun, I'm just gonna, you know, beat you around because I'm a cop and I can't. That's not how it goes. So, yeah, it's funny just talking about all of this fear and where all this is coming from. Another fear is this whole bathroom thing. You know, everyone says, I don't care what your son identifies at. He doesn't belong in the bathroom with my daughter. There's a lot of me, I, mine. Our founding fathers, they were not focused on the me and the I. They were focused on the greater good. It's in our Constitution. The greater good. That's what we were founded, to help everyone, no matter what. Freedom, unity, tranquility. And we needed each other. And that's a big thing. We needed each other back then to survive. Not just individually, but as a nation. We needed everyone.
We actually see that in some degree, just thinking about the place in our society that some good Samaritans have. Whether they are first responders on a scene, or whether they are just random people that happen to be in the right place at the right time, where they can help somebody who's legitimately in trouble. Whose life is in peril. We've gotten to the point where we're starting to sue those people and press charges against those people who go out of their way, who, for some reason or other, sit down and think to themselves, hey, this person's in trouble, I should probably go help them.
I might get hurt to help them, but there's greater chance of them being rescued and me being hurt than them dying and I won't get hurt.
Right. So we see these figures here, just thinking about CPR and where that fits in our society. You know, as you're going through the CPR training process, you're taught to go up to people now and physically ask for their permission to help them. So that's always kind of fun. Just to think about, you know, why we have to do that as a society, because otherwise, under normal conditions, you would think that people can make the right decisions. If they're unable to respond, fortunately they do have that in place to where if you are a responder on scene and the person is not responsive, then you can actually do it and you don't require asking their permission. So that's at least nice, but it's just getting to the point where people are griping about their ribs occasionally getting broken during this CPR, which
save their
happens. It happens. Just because of how violently you have to pump the chest to get, you know, the blood flowing and the heart pumped adequately. But you know what? A broken rib is really nothing compared to the cardiac arrest and cardiac failure that you were having before. So, you know what? If you don't want that broken rib, that's fine. I can just sit here and watch you die.
Because I don't want to get sued for helping you.
Because I don't want to get sued for helping you.
Just
that's not the way that we should be going. We should not be going towards an individualistic society that only cares about ourselves, and only cares about ourselves even from the respect of people who want to help us. we honestly want to sit here and,
Yep.
and press charges against people that are trying to help us, trying to go out of their way. I mean,
Risk personal injury to save their life.
I mean, what's going to be next? You start pressing charges against somebody for picking up your wallet off the street and handing it back to you because they put fingerprints on your fine leather wallet. Like,
or
come
they
on.
damaged it, and so now they want
Right.
the cost of the wallet given
Right.
back to them. And it's just somebody who's getting mugged. And somebody defends the person getting mugged, and they injure the mugger. The mugger sues the rescuer because, oh, well, he punched me. That's assault. I'm going to sue him for, damages and all of that. And he wins. And before our founding fathers, we were together. We needed each other to survive, and we knew that. We understood that, and we knew that we needed each other to be great. Now in this nation, we are so focused on individually. You want your daughter to be safe in the bathroom, so you don't want this boy who identifies as a girl to use that bathroom. When really, you don't know that if he went into the boy's bathroom, he would be beat nearly to death because of what he is and what he chooses to be. Not chooses, what he chemically in his brain is. So you want to sit there and say, well, that kid, might risk peekabooing at my daughter, when really he's risking his life going into battle. It's a serious issue that we're having, and this bathroom, it could be solved so easily, but we're not. We're so focused on us. If we want to make America great again, we have to start working together and surviving with each other, because that's the only way we're going to move forward. Because with this multiple political parties, all of this crap about, well, they're this person, I don't agree, so I'm going to be this person. That's not the way to do it. I sound like a hippie, but our forefathers were hippies with handguns. I'll be a hippie with a handgun.
I think that's a pretty good place for us to stop. We'd just like to reiterate that point that we'd like to make America great again by bringing back the brave, turning us back into the home of the brave, not the home of the afraid. They're afraid of being sued, afraid of being bullied.
Afraid to do the right thing.
Afraid to do the right thing, all these different things. And we just need to stop being afraid for a moment just so we can work together. And start having that courage, being able to stand for ourselves, being able to stand for those around us, and just coming together as a community to bring back that original idea, one of the original ideas that seemed to be pretty important in our christening as a country. So I would definitely like to see that more in the future. So I'd just like to thank you for stopping by. You can check out every one of our episodes just by typing in Based on Facts on YouTube or on Facebook. You can view everything of ours there. Thank you for coming out and listening to our talk on how to make America the home of the brave all over again.
And I'll end with, what bravery is? Bravery is having the courage to act upon the impulsive desire to help somebody that you see in need. And that's what everybody needs to do.
So I'm Chris Rex.
I'm Uriah Rex.
And we will see you next time.